My name is Roger Buck, and today we're going to continue diving into the very serious matter of the New Age replacement of Christianity. More specifically, we're going to be looking at the seminal New Age community of Findhorn in Scotland, where when I was a New Ager, which I was for something like 20 years, I was a member of the Findhorn community in Scotland for getting on for 3 years. Oddly enough, I've also recently returned from Findhorn for a 2-week visit, and we're going to have a bit about that. We're also going to be going into the key New Age figure of Alice Bailey, who draws on Helena Blavatsky's Theosophy, but attempts to put something like a superficial Christian gloss on Theosophy in search of what she, Alice Bailey, calls a New World religion, or a one-world religion that will supposedly embrace all faiths, including Christianity. I'm going to suggest that it negates those things. This is to say, then, that we're returning to the Eastern Occultism explored in previous episodes, although you don't need to have seen those episodes first to appreciate this one. Still, it may help to recap how this Eastern Occultism first appeared in the West in the 1870s, when the Russian Helena Petrovna Blavatsky specifically moved to America to initiate Theosophy there. Blavatsky claimed to bring esoteric or occult teachings from the East, which she said she had learned in Tibet. Later on, the English Alice Bailey joined Blavatsky's movement and also claimed inspiration from a Tibetan master. She likewise moved to America, establishing her own international organization there, the Lucis Trust, with real links to the United Nations. Both Bailey and Blavatsky's Theosophy, sometimes called Esoteric Buddhism, served to introduce strange new concepts into the West. Concepts like opening one's chakras, the astral plane, esoteric initiation, channeling ascended masters, and the so-called dawning age of Aquarius. Today, all this is still going strong in the New Age movement, where books which sell millions upon millions of copies, are said to be channeled from so-called enlightened masters. As we shall later see, these even include a New Age Jesus, who turns out to be highly Eastern in orientation, and who easily and eerily syncs with Alice Bailey's portrayal of the so-called Master Jesus. Once a fringe movement, the New Age has now entered the Anglo-American mainstream, where it successfully redefines Christianity in millions of people's minds. Yet how few Christians really seem to notice how much this mainstreaming of a once small movement is doing to their faith and culture.
I read that the author of the book, Helen Sheckman, said she took dictation from Jesus.
Well, there's nothing in the book. Maybe she did.
Sorry we haven't talked more tonight about how we're going to beat Donald Trump. I have an idea about Donald Trump. This man has reached into the psyche of the American people, and he has harnessed fear for political purposes. So, Mr. President, if you're listening, I want you to hear me, please. You have harnessed fear for political purposes, and only love can cast that out. So sir, I have a feeling you know what you're doing. I'm going to harness love for political purposes. I will meet you on that field, and sir, love will win.
And really, let me also bring in what I call the 4 E's of the New Age movement. I'm going to suggest that these are Eastern, Esoteric, Enlightened, in inverted commas, and English. Now, I'll be unpacking all of that, but maybe I'll just say something right now about what I mean by enlightened in inverted commas. And really, I could mean two different things. I could mean the way that the New Age is often about the search for enlightenment in some way. Following Eastern traditions, the tradition of the Buddha, who became enlightened. And Christianity, ladies and gentlemen, isn't about the search for enlightenment in this way. It's about recognizing that we are sinners. We are broken. We live in a world of evil. We live in a world corrupted by original sin. And we need a Savior. We need a Savior. It's very, very hard to marry this idea of the search for enlightenment with recognizing the darkness of your own broken heart and that you are praying for our Lord's mercy. But I also have another sense of the word enlightenment here, and actually this is more what we're going to be speaking about here. And I'm referring to the European Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th century, philosophical figures beginning with, René Descartes, the French philosopher, English philosophers like John Locke and, Scottish David Hume, Immanuel Kant, how these figures, their philosophy then led to things like the French Revolution, and much of the kind of liberal and progressive philosophy that we have today grows out of this so-called enlightenment. New Agers, who claim to be universal, I've noticed they're not conservatives. Usually they're not conservatives. They are on the liberal and progressive end of the spectrum, and that's another further particular quality of this supposedly universal spirituality.
I define God as an energy, a spiritual energy. It has no denomination. It has no judgments.
Now, in case you don't know, that was Oprah Winfrey interviewing Debbie Ford, one of her myriad of New Age gurus. And this actually fits with the so-called Enlightenment, because much of what Ford says clearly reflects the Enlightenment idea of deism, the notion of a highly impersonal God force. We'll have more clips like this showing just how much Enlightenment, either in the Eastern sense or the modern Western sense, now utterly permeates Anglo-American popular culture, thanks to the New Age movement. And then just to clarify my fourth E, English, what I mean by that is not specifically English in the way that I'm more or less English, but I mean English speaking. The English speaking world. The New Age movement grows out of English literature. These esoteric books are in English. It's a movement that has grown out of the Anglo-American world, and its greatest power base is within that world. I hope I won't, overly offend my Protestant friends and maybe viewers who are watching this, but I've noticed from my time living in Southern Europe, places like France and Spain, that the New Age doesn't have the same hold there yet. It's really a hugely Anglo-American phenomenon, and that is another very key reason why the New Age is not universal, but really has very specific qualities when you begin to look at it. There's another way to express this, really quite particular Anglo-American quality to the New Age movement. I've mentioned it before, but there's an American priest, Father Mitch Pacwa, who describes the New Age movement as, quote, a highly Americanized form of Hinduism. That is really a nutshell. Obviously, the truth is more complex. I might want to quibble slightly with Father Pacwa and say that it's more like a highly Americanized or Anglo-Americanized version of Buddhism. But you have here the same idea. A very Eastern spirituality has gone through the Anglo-American mill and come out with this really very peculiar New Age spirituality. So we're going to be diving into that much more. But before we do, I just want to mention that I've been mentioning the last couple of episodes that we now are asking for your support and patronage, if you can give it to us, through the Buy Me a Coffee scheme. And that's both through one-off donations, of $5 for a cup of coffee, which some of you have been very generous in giving us. Thank you so much. But we've also now just initiated a membership program with tiers of support. So for $5 a month, you can be an angel. For a bit more, you can be an archangel, or even a seraphim or a cherubim. Please, would you consider looking at the page? There's a link down below. I might be saying more towards the end of the episode about why we're doing this. I also want to say, just before we really dive down more into Alice Bailey and things like that, I want to say just something about my recent trip to Findhorn. It took me very much by surprise. As I say, it's hopefully the next episode, upcoming episode, that I filmed at Findhorn that is going to be all about Findhorn. I'm having some trouble getting it edited together. But yeah, we want to just say a little bit now about this. We went there, Kim, my wife, and I, for as I said before, I have elderly family there. There are other reasons that we went there as well. And it's really been yielding a great deal of insight. When we get to the upcoming episode, some people may be surprised that I really emphasize the idealism that I found up there, the kindness of many people, many positive qualities, including these beautiful Findhorn gardens that have been tended and cared for in such a wonderful way for 60 years. I want to say again, I am speaking about the New Age movement as an occult replacement for Christianity. I'm speaking about something, very serious. But most of the people at Findhorn wouldn't recognize that. When I went to Findhorn and lived at Findhorn, I didn't go there, to celebrate occult rituals or with a conscious intention of creating an occult replacement. I really came across a lot of human decency, idealism, beauty there, all right? Along with very serious issues. And look, I think what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give you something like a 3 or 4 minute preview of the upcoming episode on Findhorn, because if I run these, a few minutes now, it will actually help open us out to other things that I'm going to be saying in this episode about Alice Bailey, Theosophy, the one world religion, and, that Alice Bailey was pioneering, universal spirituality. All of this, I think, may help if we just give you a little preview of the upcoming episode that we filmed at Findhorn. Alright, I'm here now in front of the hall again, with a book that was very important to me many years ago. This is a book called Faces of Findhorn, Images of a Planetary Family. It was published in 1980, which again was the year I arrived. It's filled with photography of the young and dynamic people that built the place. But I'll just read a tiny section here from David Spangler, who will be speaking about it all. And he says that one idea, more than any other, represents the seed from which Findhorn and all that it has created has sprung. It is the idea that a planetary culture is emerging in our time, and that places like Findhorn exist to explore, to serve, and to further that emergence. But for some viewers, some of you, all of this possibly raises questions, maybe profound questions. What is really meant by a planetary village? What is meant by a planetary civilization? What about a universal spirituality? And who were these people who felt they could create a center that would be, as they described it, an outpost of the new civilization of the dawning age of Aquarius? How did they come to be here? We will be exploring all of this as we proceed. But I might just say right now that different people will obviously regard what I'm saying in different ways. When I was 16 and I came here, all of this made complete sense to me. It made complete sense for the next 20 years of my life. For other people, maybe more secular people, it all sounded like hogwash, like metaphysical nonsense. other people, maybe more traditionally minded people, Christians, or for that matter, traditionally minded Buddhists or Muslims, would have another perspective, asking, what has your universal spirituality got to do with me? These questions, I didn't think about them much in my New Age youth at Findhorn, but I've come to think about them very, very much today. And we're going to be exploring these. I don't think, ladies and gentlemen, that we will have any firm and clear, precise answers to these questions, because really, what lies here has very deep roots. The deep roots go back at least as far as the esoteric philosophy of Alice Bailey and Helena Blavatsky that we have been exploring in previous episodes. Helena Blavatsky, who founded the Theosophical Society on November the 17th, if I recall correctly, 1875. And when I lived at Findhorn, I imagine it's different today, there were many people who took note of the fact that Findhorn was founded on November the 17th, 1962, and they consider that more than simple coincidence. The roots of Findhorn really go deep, deep, deep into Theosophy, and we'll be evoking those roots as we proceed. But really, none of these questions can be answered about what is a universal spirituality. Why do some people feel they've got the, the right to establish this, this new universal spirituality for a new dawning age of Aquarius? These are questions that we'll be exploring as I continue. They're questions that are going on very deeply in my soul as I ponder this. By doing this episode first, before the upcoming one, we can make real headway with these questions and supply some things that are real keys to how people could come to believe they were pioneering a new planetary civilization. David Spangler there, whom I was at least acquainted with. I doubt he remembers me, but I remember him. Suggesting that Findhorn's most important purpose was to further the emergence of a new planetary civilization. Where do people come to such ideas? We're going to be going into Alice Bailey, these roots of the New Age. Maybe I just say, we've just done a big episode on this channel speaking about the occult replacement of Christianity. It's headed towards 11,000 views. Never had anything like this before. I actually wonder if part of why this video has done so well by my standards is that I think that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm finding a new clarity this summer about what my work is really about. And I think I might say some more personal things about that at the end of this episode. But to stay with the themes now, I feel there is a lot of very simplistic, sensationalist, black and white stuff about the New Age out there. And I want to do something different. These things are these things are too serious. Christianity is being replaced in the West by this supposedly universal spirituality, and it deserves to be understood, not in simplistic black and white terms. What I thought I'd do, actually, is read you a chapter from my big core Jesu Syncretism book, which is all about the New Age, the roots of the New Age, also Christianity, obviously, especially Catholic Christianity, and the profound differences between this very particular New Age spirituality and Christianity. By going into a chapter here called Enlightened, Eastern, Esoteric, and English, we're just going to start reading you the chapter. From the course of history, it is clear that revolutionary ideas generally emerge within small circles of reformers first. Later, their ideas diffuse more widely, generalizing outwards to the wider population. This is what's happened over the last 30 or 40 years, ladies and gentlemen. The New Age, which when I first encountered it, age 16 in 1980, was a relatively small circle, has gone mainstream. And a lot of work was done to make it go mainstream. Thus, the ideals of the Enlightenment, 17th, 18th century Enlightenment, were initially the preserve of a small contingent of elite philosophers before they generalized out to Western society and much of the globe. In the 19th century, communism was born amongst the likes of Marx, Engels, and their retinue. Within 100 years, it covered Russia, Eastern Europe, and China. Likewise, the sexual revolution of the 1960s did not arise from nowhere. Earlier in the century, Freud and his disciples warned of the quote-unquote dangers of sexual repression and the quote-unquote hypocrisy of conventional sexual mores. But with the 60s, the need to throw off sexual fetters, I have that in inverted commas too, likewise generalized to the entire populace. This small-scale thing went into the entire population. Similarly, New Age thinking began decades ago in the parlors of theosophists, but following the 1960s, the theosophical agenda became popularized. The New Age belongs part and parcel to 1960s iconoclasm. New Agers are not conservatives. They are heirs to the 60s and readily sympathize with those who continue the fight for liberal and progressive values. Almost automatically, they partake in the liberal dismissal of traditional values. What our forebears cherished is all too confidently denigrated without a second thought. Hierarchy and authority are frequently treated as nothing but meaningless and oppressive. The intellectual work of the university is dismissed as head-tripping. This was a very, very key feature at Findhorn. Don't get into your head. Don't go into your head. Don't be overly intellectual. Be with your feelings. As Hanegraaff, this is a Dutch academic studying the New Age, has said, the New Age amounts to, these are his words, quote, a syncretism of esoteric and secular elements. From whence this latest tsunami of iconoclasm? Where do these tsunamis come from? Well, it's the French Revolution, the Communist Revolution, or now the New Age Revolution, happening under people's noses. What convulsion in the depths of the soul of the world generated the tidal wave? We have seen how the New Age is related to a vast, esoteric panorama, which publicly emerged with Blavatsky. Blavatsky claimed her books were inspired by an elite group of Eastern masters operating from the hidden recesses of the Himalayas. In the 20th century, Alice Bailey claimed the self-same hidden masters for her inspiration. We have already mentioned the numerous channeled books in the New Age. Needless to say, the vast majority of these books are drivel. They are easily explained by processes of human imagination. But, dear lector, in my 30 years of experience, getting on for 40 now, I have to declare that a few of these books, and often the most influential ones, are not drivel. Rather, they betray an extremely elaborate intelligence that would sometimes seem to surpass the conscious capacities of the human author who scribed them. Look, I'm going to say something here. This could awaken skepticism. I have an interview that Joseph Shaw, who's taught at Oxford University, did with me, where he began to look into the Alice Bailey books. And I just want to play you. Just a very brief section of Dr. Shaw, and what he thought when he actually started looking at Alice Bailey. You'll see why.
I've read a little bit of New Age literature in my day, and I really haven't progressed beyond the the most popular stuff, and it's quite easy to read, and it's appealing in various obvious ways, and it's not very demanding. But those individuals who write those books and who give the kind of meditation retreats, they are themselves the disciples of this kind of this inner group, the more serious writers, and they won't, the popular writers, they won't be reading Alice Bailey, but the serious writers are. So there's this kind of inner group, and I'm not saying this is a kind of conspiracy or anything peculiar. This is about how many movements work. Indeed, you could make the same point about Christianity. So, there are kind of popular Catholic writers, and there are kind of more academic, more scholarly writers, and the popular ones are the ones who absorbed the ideas through this, percolating down, and then you go back beyond the scholarly writers. Who are they getting their inspiration from? Well, it's Scripture, the Fathers of the Church. So in the case of the New Age, it's not the Fathers of the Church; it's Alice Bailey and Blavatsky. But Alice Bailey has taken on this particularly important role, and being able to read, being able to understand, having the stomach to read Alice Bailey is obviously something which is given only to the kind of, the cognoscenti, the kind of the Illuminati of the movement, the kind of the inner initiates of the whole thing. And I must say, I was fascinated by your account of when you were at your peak, how you would spend hours in meditation, and then you'd read hundreds and hundreds of pages week by week, and getting through vast volumes of this incredibly abstruse stuff. And I thought, listen to you. This is how you can get totally kind of immersed in a tradition, in a language, in a way of talking, in a thought world. And of course, once you do that, the whole thing makes sense more easily. You can start reading it more quickly. You can see all the connections and stuff. People starting at it is a nightmare. It's a nightmare of really complicated technical terms, and and that is something. Of course, it's not like the Fathers of the Church. It's nothing like as difficult as this stuff. I mean, it really is. I mean, the whole process of these works and getting in to read these works is itself an illustration of what the works themselves describe, which is this process of being inducted and enlightened. And you, Roger, you obviously, you've made that transition. And one of the things that you say in the book is that kind of, your some of your New Age kind of, the higher ups, the kind of the more, the people who are the long-term residents, as it were, Findhorn, which is the kind of the, people say it's the Vatican of the New Age movement. They kind of treated you with a special respect after they realized that you were kind of reading this, this is the real stuff. This is the kind of the fons et origo of the whole thing. And well, I say we have to take this seriously. We have to take the idea seriously. I mean, I'm not suggesting that listeners of this podcast go off and start reading Alice Bailey, because you'd probably go crazy. I certainly would. And it's not perhaps necessary. All you have to do is read Roger's books and he'll tell you what you need to know.
So I thought I'd bring in Joseph there in his kind of warm and witty and inimitable manner to help back up this claim that I'm making, that this stuff is not exactly drivel. It may be demented, you may think, but it's not easy to read this stuff. It really isn't easy to read this stuff. Anyway, I'm going to continue now. Such immensely sophisticated books include those of Alice Bailey, as well as A Course in Miracles, claimed to be channeled from Jesus. These writings exert an extensive, compelling influence, precisely because they are not the shallow drivel that is here today, gone tomorrow. What am I saying? Am I suggesting New Age ideology? stems from a conspiratorial cabal of beings, some of whom may not be incarnate. The Church does not refute the existence of disincarnate beings working in this world. The rite of exorcism bears testimony to this. No, the Church does not deny the active presence of spirits and angels, some of which are fallen angels. But the Church warns against delving into these matters too deeply, and I would not attempt to excavate them here, even if I could. But if you ask me, lector, if I suspect the presence of hidden entities behind the emergence of New Age ideology, I will not deny that I do. If you ask me whether fallen angels might sometimes masquerade as angels of light, I will reply, why not? But why stop there? If you ask me if the communist ideology partook of demonic inspiration, I will not deny it. My answer will be similar in regard to the extreme capitalism which ravages our planet today, and the earlier waves of iconoclasm that served to destroy Christendom. Could the inspiration of fallen angels be working there too? Why not? And conversely, what if, amidst these tempests of cruelty, positive developments also emerge? Is it not self-evident the last centuries have borne witness to genuine progress? For me, ladies and gentlemen, it's undeniable. We don't have slavery anymore. We don't send, children down the mines the way the Victorians did. Capitalism, I think I might bring this out at the end of the episode. I said I'm going to say some personal things at the end of the episode. I think I'm going to bring this into it. We may be returning with capitalism to Dickens's time, Dickensian times. So we're not necessarily over this yet. Anyway, that's for the more personal material that I'm saving as going to be a special personal section at the end of this episode. Let's get back to my text. Could it not be that unfallen angels are involved as well? For angels are not only present amongst us, but they respond to our prayers. Do angels help struggling humanity to bring forth all that is good and true amidst the wreckage, even whilst fallen angels work to bury those same things? Personally, I trust something like this to be very much the case. However, I am not competent to write a book about angels and demons. Perhaps at this juncture we might recall what has been remarked earlier. New Age iconoclasm is clearly related to Theosophy. It is likewise plainly linked to secular values. We have seen how Theosophy arose precisely in those countries that most unambiguously embraced secular values. These are the same nations that earlier embraced Reformation and Enlightenment iconoclasm most unequivocally, the Protestant English-speaking nations. Alright, I want to pause for a moment in reading the book. I've just suggested that Theosophy was taken up by the Protestant world far more than by the Catholic countries, and that the Protestant world was the world, especially the English-speaking world, that embraced the Enlightenment. And I'm going to be suggesting in this episode that it is this kind of environment, the environment that took on the Enlightenment most seriously, that provided fertile ground for theosophists like Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey to propagate the theosophical doctrines at the heart of the New Age movement. And this goes back to what I said at the beginning of the episode, that, Enlightenment philosophy of the 17th and 18th century, of which British figures were very notable, like John Locke and David Hume, that has led to today's liberal and progressive values. In all my experience, it seems to me that the Protestant world tended more to capitulate to those values, and the Catholic world tended to resist it to its teeth. That is the fruit of my experience of having lived, in Catholic cultures or culturally Catholic nations like France and Spain. Ireland also resisted this to its teeth before, the massive media like Ireland becoming awash in Anglosphere media. This is my point. In the book, I'm going to cut a section now because it could get too tedious, where I go into France. The book, it's always tricky taking sections out of a book, reading them. It's relevant to the book, but it's not relevant to our main theme here. But I go into a whole section about how France was so different from the Protestant English-speaking world, and France resisted the Theosophists in a way that England never did. The whole point here is that both historically and in the present day, I see still resistance to the New Age movement, from the southern Catholic countries of Europe where I have lived. It's very different from the Anglo-American world still, and that is why I'm pointing out how, if you've lived in other countries and maybe you speak a bit of French and things like that, you will really be able to see how Anglo-American the New Age is. And with the 60s revolution, it was from English-speaking nations that Theosophy was popularized. As a major American pop song had it, this was the dawning of the Age of Aquarius. Thus, if one required a simple formula for the New Age phenomenon, one might be tempted to characterize it by 4 E's: English, Enlightenment, Eastern, Esoteric. Within the New Age, one finds a distinctly anti-Christian bias, and particularly an anti-Catholic one. This bias is not surprising if one recognizes whence the movement stems: the Protestant and Enlightenment trajectory of Anglo-American civilization. When this is plainly seen, it is likewise plain why Catholic Christianity, above all, is the natural target of liberal New Ageism, even if New Agers frequently deny they target anything at all. New Agers are not going to really say, we're targeting these things. They genuinely believe that their spirituality is universal. This is what I met up at Findhorn recently. People that, are really, really convinced that, their spirituality is kind and open and embracing. And indeed, I felt the goodwill of people at Findhorn. They don't, many of them have no intention, at anything like the occult replacement of Christianity. They have no idea that something like this could even be going on. Now, to detail the manifold ways anti-Christian ideology emerged in the New Age, much less exhume its subterranean roots, is a Herculean task beyond my capacities. Yet, every biography affords windows onto the world, and my own life story offers a certain window onto an important New Age nexus point. It is a locus where many things converged: the hippie movement, psychotherapy, secular and liberal ideals, Eastern esotericism, astrology, ecological concerns, and still more. We come then to the Findhorn community, a major root of the entire New Age movement. Indeed, as the Vatican document Jesus Christ, the bearer of the water of life, tells us, the two centers, which were the initial powerhouses of the New Age, and to a certain extent still are, were the garden community at Findhorn in northeast Scotland, and the Centre for the Development of Human Potential at Esalen in Big Sur, California, in the United States of America. California and Britain both are English-speaking, and both are amongst the most liberal places of all in the Anglosphere. You know, the New Age didn't emerge out of, the so-called red states in America. It didn't come out of places like Alabama. It came out of California. And Britain is one of the most liberal and progressive of the European nations. From having lived in a number of European countries, I can really vouch for that. And having heard from the Vatican on Findhorn, it's maybe worth noting what Father Malachi Martin said about Findhorn too. He called it the Vatican City of the New Age movement. There's no doubt a little hyperbole there, but it's not without a grain of truth either. In addition to what the Vatican writes, Findhorn has lately garnered significant recognition from the secular sphere, for the Findhorn Foundation is now a non-governmental organization in the United Nations. Moreover, Eileen Caddy, co-founder of the community, was made a member of the British Empire, MBE, an honor in the Order of Chivalry in Britain, below a knighthood, but still filled with prestige. The British establishment, didn't give her a knighthood or, one of the higher honors, dame or whatever, but it gave her MBE, member of the British Empire, the founder or co-founder of the Findhorn community. Yes, Findhorn is a place that has wielded astonishing influence out of all proportion to immediate appearances, for it is a small community of a few hundred folk at best, located in a remote part of the British Isles, further north than Juneau, Alaska. Yet Findhorn exerted a strange, attractive power. People from the far reaches of the world have expended significant time, energy, and money to wend their way up to its lonely, windswept peninsula in the far north of Scotland. For them, Findhorn became a contemporary centre of pilgrimage. Some spoke of it as a modern mystery school, where one underwent processes of spiritual initiation, which in ages past took place in hidden enclaves sheltered from the world. For others, Findhorn represented a nascent city of light, an outpost for a new planetary civilization. Now, not only did untold numbers stream into Findhorn, but just as importantly, they also streamed out again. Findhorn remains a transitory place. Many only come for a few weeks or months. Others, like myself, spend 2 or 3 years there. Relatively few truly settle down in the community. Rather, most move on, carrying Findhorn with them as they go. Certainly, I left the community for Cambridge, in England, with the special intent of taking Findhorn with me. In like manner, other community members moved outwards, ambassadors for a, quote, unquote, new spirituality for a new age. Then there are the new age, so-called stars drawn to Findhorn Just as secular culture has celebrated figures, icons, and idols, so too does the holistic scene, so-called. Sometimes these even overlap. Shirley MacLaine, the Hollywood actress Shirley MacLaine, visited the community not long after I first went there. But mostly it was a quote-unquote stellar array of lesser-known, charismatic figures who came to provide talks, presentations, experiential workshops, visualizations, psychotherapeutic exercises, full moon meditations, and more. From all this, a potent cultural matrix and spiritual Weltanschauung emerged. Ambassadors then went forth from that matrix, carrying New Age ideology with them, without the least consciousness it was ideology. At least I myself was such an ambassador, with no idea that was what I was doing. Only with 30 years of hindsight do I see how I became the messenger of a syncretic creed mixing Eastern esotericism and the post-60s liberal revolution. By the 1980s, when I arrived, most Findhorn folk were clearly not pursuing esoteric studies, whilst in former times, community members avidly devoured theosophical literature. By that time, things had changed. Generally speaking, people were more engaged, sincerely and movingly, with each other's emotional experience rather than abstruse esoteric books. But for myself, at least, another Findhorn existed. And during my years there, my orientation was different from that of many of my fellows. For more than most others, I felt drawn to old archives regarding Findhorn's origins, and so I dusted off old lectures once held at the community, but now little read. From these, it was clear Findhorn's pioneers had been heavily influenced by earlier streams of Anglophone esotericism. Again, here I mean Theosophy. Theosophy did not go down in places like France the way it did in the Anglosphere. And for long years, after leaving the community, I continued pondering Findhorn's roots as an enthusiastic devotee. So I was really looking into Findhorn's origins, Findhorn's roots at the time. Look, I'm going to read you a passage about Findhorn's origins. I think I just should say that for better or worse, this passage will also be repeated in the episode that I filmed up at Findhorn. Again, for better or worse, but anyway, I'm going to read it again now. According to the tale, as it is popularly told, the Findhorn community was founded by 3 middle-aged adults in 1962. Outside the little coastal Scottish village of Findhorn, there was a site for mobile homes, normally used only in the brief, warm summer. But in the gloomy November of that year, English ex-hoteliers, they run a hotel, Peter and Eileen Caddy, their 3 children, and a Canadian colleague, Dorothy MacLean, settled there in circumstances that seemed dire, particularly as all 3 were accustomed to much better standards. The hotel that they had previously managed had been a 4-star hotel. So this is a bitter blow of fate, you would think, to end up being forced to move into, a freezing cold, caravan site. Caravans, what they call in Britain, mobile home site, in the bleak, midwinter of 1962. However, they did not consider this a blow of ill fate. Instead, they trusted that a higher spiritual purpose summoned them to this otherwise cold and bleak situation. All three possessed very different spiritual backgrounds, though none could be called Christian in a traditional sense. Eileen Caddy heard a distinct voice in prayer, which she identified with God. This voice gave precise directions from which the Findhorn community started taking form. It instructed the caddies what to do, even down to minute details, such as which vegetables to eat and which vegetables to avoid. Meanwhile, Peter Caddy was different. From adolescence, he had diligently pursued an esoteric formation according to Theosophical and Rosicrucian principles. Dorothy McLean was different again. She claimed a contact with devas. These were said to be angelic beings which overlighted the plants and forces of nature. For individual species, cabbage, pea, or broccoli, for example, were each said to be guided by an individual deva, which then this deva offered messages to McLean, who recorded them word for word. From the start, Findhorn emphasized organic gardening in accordance with McLean's messages. So her channeling, the pea deva or the cabbage deva. The results were striking. Here was a sandy soil close to a windswept beach, yet in barren conditions and a poor climate, extraordinary vegetables started appearing. Soon fame spread of a miraculous garden with 40-pound cabbages grown in near sand. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all true as far as I can see. I knew Eileen Caddy. I knew her the best of these people that founded Findhorn. I think she had integrity. I don't think she was lying. I've seen a photograph of her with one of these gigantic 40-pound cabbages. I don't think the photo was doctored in any way. This is back in the 80s, long before Photoshop. As I recall, the cabbage was, almost half the size of this sort of petite woman, a small woman. It was this gigantic cabbage grown in near sand. There are other, data for this as well. It was obvious with such results that the caddies and McLean had a particular affinity with the forces of nature, or even the cabbage deva. It is hardly surprising that the Findhorn Gardens caught the attention of the 1960s flower children. Amidst the general revolt against the, quote-unquote establishment, many dreamt of returning to nature. Here were the ecological concerns that later manifested in the Green Movement. Although neither the caddies nor McLean were remotely like the hippies, they nevertheless welcomed them. Thus, the small community expanded as young rebels and dropouts arrived. But substantial growth, as well as substantive change, only arrived in 1970 with the advent of a young 24-year-old American from California, David Spangler. Obedient to the inner voice that Eileen heard, Peter Caddy appointed Spangler almost immediately as the community's co-director. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Peter Caddy, I think I'm right in saying he must have been in his 50s by then. He's running this odd little community. This 24-year-old American comes to visit it, and Eileen hears the voice that she believes to be of God, saying that David Spangler is very important and to be appointed as the co-director, and Peter, obedient to this voice, immediately appoints this man co-director of this community. All right. Alongside Spangler, a cohort of his friends and followers arrived from America, and still more followed in their wake. The influx transformed the community, and after 1970, a rather different culture emerged at Findhorn. Yeah, substantive change, a different culture. Numerous new elements became added to the mix, ranging from psychotherapy to Spangler's theosophical lecturing. Indeed, it has long seemed to me that David Spangler is the true founder of the Findhorn people know today. Spangler, I believe, would shrug this accolade off. He plainly eschewed traditional leadership roles. But even when I was a Findhorn devotee, I told people to look to Spangler as the uncredited author of the place, as it is today. This may not be fair. He was there, I was not. But I reported as my honest assessment of the situation from a time when I was passionately devoted to Findhorn. I want to say this, it'll come out in the upcoming episode. As strange as this may sound to you, Findhorn was my hope for humanity. It was my hope for the world for over 20 years of my life. And at that time that I believed that, I really saw David Spangler, whether I'm right, whether I'm wrong, as the key figure in this place. Okay? All right. Whether I am mistaken or not, what I say emerges from decades of honest love for the community, a community where I was literally an insider for nearly 3 years, and one to which I remained loyal, as well as current with its developments, for years after I left. Now, Spangler's cohort imported numerous things from the American West Coast to Findhorn. We have mentioned the therapy culture, which emerged in California during that time, but something else also arrived with Spangler's lecturing, the esoteric vision of Alice A. Bailey. At least I studied Spangler's lectures avidly, and the Bailey heritage was more than obvious to me. And alongside with Spangler, many other Findhorn pioneers of the early 1970s also studied Alice Bailey. I just want to nuance what I've just said about David Spangler before we begin diving into Alice Bailey. I want to point out that David Spangler himself, I've been studying his works, since the early 80s when I first encountered them, as a devotee and as a critic, for 40 years of my life now. He would say himself that his true sources of information are not so much the Theosophy of Alice Bailey, but what he would term his own sort of inner contacts, interior contacts with inner subtle or disincarnate beings that he could be said to be channeling, except that he would want to make some fine distinctions there and say, no, I'm not channeling, I'm doing something else. But for our purposes, we can speak about David Spangler channeling these beings. I want to say that I am aware of all of this, but the theosophical footprint is all over the early David Spangler material, at least, less so in later years. And the more I've really tried to study even the later David Spangler material, it seems to me that he is working with things that are very, very much in alignment with a theosophical picture that emerges in Alice Bailey, which we're coming to. But I want to do justice to people on this channel, ladies and gentlemen. David Spangler, I'm just going to say this quite quickly, and some of the more sensationalist things that's come out. He had a quote many years ago that I can see has been mangled out of all proportion on the internet, so that people speak about him as a Luciferian. I want to say that in terms of what people mean by that word, David Spangler does not give me any impression like that. I'm not saying that what he's presenting is not enormously serious in terms for, really a very destructive threat to everything that Christianity has meant. Okay? And paradoxically, I want to say that, having spent a bit of time with the man, I do believe in his integrity, and that he sincerely believes, that this new planetary spirituality, this planetary civilization that he writes about, is what he believes is the right way ahead for humanity. And he may not even be, for all I know, fully aware of what I'm saying, on these videos, that this planetary spirituality that he believes is the way forward, is actually what I'm calling the occult replacement of Christianity. That it cannot help but destroy so much of what Christianity is really about. It cannot help it. It does not embrace Christianity, it destroys it. How conscious of that David Spangler really is a question that I would like to leave open. I don't want to go wagging my finger based on some mangled New Age quote, and go around calling David Spangler a Luciferian, when I do see considerable idealism in the man, and indeed considerable integrity, aiming at what he truly believes is best. But having said all that, let me go back to my book, and we're going to really, go into Alice Bailey now. All right. With Alice Bailey, we return, of course, to Theosophy. More precisely, we might say Neo-Theosophy. For Bailey's oeuvre represents a potent 20th century extension of Blavatsky. It takes Blavatsky's foundations, but it builds on these foundations considerably. I mentioned already, it actually gives them a kind of Christian gloss that you don't find in Blavatsky. There are certain people into Blavatsky that say, well, no, Bailey has, turned Theosophy into something Christian. I consider that absurd, but you will find Blavatsky purists who say that. What to say of these books? They cover some 10,000 pages in dense prose, which is by no means stupid or naive. I have to say that, so much New Age channel books are stupid or naive. Here, they differ from many New Age writings. They possess immense, if dangerous, sophistication. How to possibly render justice to their arcane immensity in a few brief paragraphs. Justice is not possible in these constraints, and I offer nothing more than a crude, simplistic précis. Given that caveat, the Bailey books present their readers with a prodigious, esoteric vision. A staggering panorama of purported phenomena is asserted, which feature everything from numerous non-physical planes of existence, reincarnation and karma, the evolutionary development of humanity from prehistoric civilizations with names like Lemuria and Atlantis, to vast entities such as the solar and planetary logoi, cosmic intelligences who are said to be incarnated in the planetary bodies of the solar system. Much is also made of a hidden hierarchy of initiated masters, who, it is said, will shortly guide the human race into the coming new age of Aquarius. Indeed, we are indebted to the Bailey writings for the popular emergence of the term New Age, which features prominently in the Bailey books and even their titles, e.g., Discipleship in the New Age, Education in the New Age. Those are some of the titles. I might mention that Discipleship in the New Age is 2 volumes running to over 1,000 pages. Again, dense stuff. I think I only read the first one, parts of the second. I've maybe read, Vallis Bailey, wrote 10,000 pages. I think I worked through about 5,000 pages of it. These books, furthermore, offer a highly detailed esoteric anatomy, an anatomy with diagrams of the human being. Herein, the human entity is divided into a higher monad, so-called, quote-unquote, a soul, and quote-unquote, lower vehicles that, in descending order, are termed the mental, astral, etheric, and physical bodies. Maybe I just explain this by saying that, the spirituality of Alice Bailey, and I've been speaking about it as an impersonal spirituality, is all about disidentification with who we are as human beings. There is a whole set of exercises there that are to suggest, I am not my mind, or I am not my mental vehicle. I am not my emotions or my feelings. I am not my physical body. I am this sort of transcendent higher self. That's what I really am. And yeah, these other things, our minds, our feelings, our bodies, are vehicles. Are vehicles that we can drive. I'm sorry, I'm being a bit facetious, but I actually think you would find comments in there about driving your astral vehicle or whatever. We better not get too much into that. But I think the real point is that we're going to go more into this, but I've touched on it before. When I came out of the Alice Bailey material into Catholicism, I became aware of this dehumanizing tendency, this impersonal tendency to sort of disidentify with everything that made me human, and yes, even to I don't want to speak about this facetiously, ladies and gentlemen. I fear I've just done that. To drive my mental, drive my mental or emotional vehicles or whatever. It's a process that now as a Catholic, strikes me as less than fully human, to say the least. Less than fully human. And it's better that I speak to you, ladies and gentlemen, with sincerity about that, rather than, kind of laughing at it. I may even re-record this section because I'm not happy about laughing at it. Something is very serious here about an Eastern path where we're encouraged to detach, disidentify with everything that makes us human. All right. All these vehicles then are then said to be conditioned by 7 rays, 12 zodiac signs, and still further related forces. This vast, intricate complexity need not detain us here. However, a few things must be highlighted, for important New Age themes are prefigured in Alice Bailey's books. There is, for example, the New Age polarity of the higher self being resisted by the quote-unquote lower self, sometimes called the ego. However, one almost never hears of praying humbly to God for help. Yeah, I just want to bring out the differences. The New Age is based on this supposedly universal spirituality, but it leaves out, and even negates, so much of what is core to Christianity. Okay? Instead, the New Age way involves transforming the quote-unquote lower self, or ego, so that the power of the quote-unquote higher self, one's own transcendent nature, can manifest. This common New Age meme is indebted, deeply indebted, to Theosophy. Indeed, Alice Bailey calls for the higher self to control the quote-unquote lower personality, or to drive the vehicles. Bailey even suggests that if one prays to God, one actually addresses not God, but one's own, quote-unquote higher self. Maybe I just say this before moving on, ladies and gentlemen. Our Lord said, "Judge not, that ye be not judged." It's not up for us to judge these people, especially people who I can see genuinely believe that they are trying to do something to help humanity in this time of terrible crisis. The New Age is, in part about the crisis of materialism. Some people will think I'm being very, very soft on here. I'm not seeing the very grave and serious problems. But I believe in the approach that I've taken in my books, which, have the title The Gentle Traditionalist. At times I feel like, maybe earlier in this video series, it's hard to actually change the earlier videos now, that I haven't been gentle enough. Really, my approach is to say that there is something very, very, very serious going on here. Something heartbreaking. Something tragic. It's a bit like multiculturalism. There are people that believe in multiculturalism, that even have it as an ideal without really realizing that multiculturalism actually destroys the cultures that it is, supposedly about embracing. Many people are lost in this notion. They really think that they are doing something multicultural, embracing all cultures. And they don't really see that maybe something much darker is at work.
Tonight, we're taking a chance as we tap into our spiritual side. Anybody know what their spiritual side is? That's good. I am not talking about religion. I am not talking about religion. I am a Christian. That is my faith. I'm not asking you to be a Christian. If you want to be one, I can show you how. But it is not required. I have respect for all faiths. All faiths.
The New Age is like that. Let's just keep with the book. Bailey anticipates another key New Age notion, that a new, quote-unquote, planetary civilization, we're coming back to what I quoted from David Spangler, as being Findhorn's key purpose earlier on in the video I shot up there, that a new, quote-unquote, planetary civilization is rapidly evolving toward a grand synthesis. This great synthesis will unite religion, science, and philosophy. Bailey has none of the Christian concern about syncretism. All religions will be fused into a new world religion. We really probably have to do a whole episode on Alice Bailey's New World Religion and what it really means. But, science and religion will likewise be merged, because that which presently divides these realms will be recognized as illusory. Humanity will also achieve a staggering higher consciousness, in which its present divisions will likewise stand revealed as nothing but illusory separation. Clearly, Eastern syncretic theosophy throws down the gauntlet before Christianity here. It hardly needs saying that Christian faith is rendered obsolete by these claims. Indeed, Bailey predicts the age of Christianity is more or less finished. For her, illusory separation, quote unquote, illusory separation, the illusory separation between all religions and peoples, and Christianity, these belong to the outgoing age of Pisces, so-called. However, the new world religion can now be glimpsed already in the haze of a new Aquarian dawn. Indeed, Bailey is quite explicit as to this new synthesized religion. Easter, for example, will still be celebrated in her, one world religion, though its greatest festival will be Wesak, the Buddha's birthday, also the day that he died and was enlightened. A new group of world servers, this is an Alice Bailey term, a new group of world servers will give birth to the new religion, amongst whom will appear the initiated masters of old, reincarnating amongst the youth of today. Many students of Alice Bailey assume they belong to this new wave of initiates. The colossal optimism of Bailey's Aquarian New Age should be apparent by now. Moreover, the notions of the masters ushering in an astonishing new era of expanded consciousness allows little sympathy for today's heartbreaking problems. Yeah, I'm going to come to that in a minute. There is this strange impersonal detachment, as you're about to hear, in the Alice Bailey works about human suffering. Before we go into that, I want to say that this helps explain what I said at the film footage, shot up at Findhorn, where I said, how could these people believe that this little place, in the north of Scotland, remote north of Scotland, could be an outpost of a new planetary civilization? Why do some people feel they've got the, the right to establish this, this new universal spirituality for a new dawning age of Aquarius? And the answer, ladies and gentlemen, has a lot to do with what I've been quoting you from Alice Bailey, because in my view now, the Alice Bailey books foster this spiritual elitism, where people, believe that they are initiates being guided by the hidden masters in the Himalayas, channeling these masters, and they believe that they're an elite. And this incredible optimistic vision of Alice Bailey that it's all going to happen. We're headed towards this one world religion. We're headed towards this, multicultural synthesis of all religious approaches. The language has changed a bit in Findhorn, but it's the same core ideas. And indeed, David Spangler was still very much speaking about Findhorn as an outpost for the new planetary civilization. Findhorn is a direct continuation, of so much in the Alice Bailey books. But let me go on to, the point I'm now making about this strange detachment. Buddhism is all about detachment. This strange detachment from human suffering. So I write here, this allows little sympathy for today's heartbreaking problems. Human tragedy generally receives short shrift in the Bailey books. Thus, as we shall see, this is later in the book, not in this episode so much, the author actually celebrates the atomic holocaust in Japan. Very, very serious stuff here, but we won't really be able to go into it in this episode. Other nightmares of our time are dismissed as merely ephemeral. I think I've mentioned before that, Alice Bailey was very critical of Hitler, but not Stalin, not Stalin's Russia. There's a lot in that. I think I brought that out in the last episode on the occult replacement of Christianity, based on things that Tomberg was saying. Thus, the problems posed by capitalism or scientific materialism are acknowledged. New Agers are concerned about, global materialism and, at their best, global capitalism. But they're treated as temporary. They will shortly be remedied. They're going to be fixed as Aquarius comes in. Science, for example, will soon overcome its materialistic prejudices when the esoteric nature of reality is discovered. The whole kind of theme in the Alice Bailey books, and Blavatsky, is that the West, this is particularly in Blavatsky, the West has messed everything up. It's dragged us into materialism, and now, like the East needs to save us. And Alice Bailey is giving a message that masters from the East, mainly from the East, not all of them, are now going to save the West, save the world, by ushering in this grandiose vision, negating Christianity, Christianity as it has been traditionally known, replacing it with some kind of strange Christian gloss about Christ consciousness, which you now have, Oprah Winfrey and all kinds of people broadcasting around the planet. It's particularly broadcasting around the Anglo-American world.
The Power Within You by Eric Butterworth, where he talks about the Christ consciousness. And up until then, I was like you, Margit. I thought Jesus came, died on the cross, that Jesus' being here was about his death, when it really was about him coming to show us how to do it, how to be, to show us the Christ consciousness that he had, and that consciousness abides with all of us.
Yes.
That's what I got.
Yes.
That's what I got.
Yes.
Thank you.
As we explored in this episode here, anyone who really knows Alice Bailey's Theosophy can easily see how her essentially Eastern esoteric notion of Christ consciousness, so-called, has now entered the mainstream through popular American figures like Oprah Winfrey. And if I am redundantly emphatic here, it is because a strange blend of Eastern esotericism and American popular culture is replacing Christianity as we have known it. It's happening right under our noses, and so few Catholics seem to know or care. Look, before continuing here, there's a painting called Buddha the Conqueror, I think, by the theosophical artist Nicholas Roerich that I used in the last episode. I'm going to bring it up here as well. And I'm bringing it up here because Nicholas Roerich's theosophical Eastern art conveys something of this spirit, of this Eastern detached sage lost in contemplation. We featured Valentin Tomberg speaking about the spiritual adultery of substituting Christ crucified with an Eastern sage deep in meditation. This art expresses some of the theosophical spirit that I'm getting at here. Going back to the book, having studied thousands of pages of Alice Bailey's writings, I offer you my opinion, lector, that none of this is charlatanism, pure and simple. Rather, something far more tragic, disturbing, far more disturbing, is on offer here. For it was said, and not without a certain foundation, I think, that these writings were not simply the work of the Englishwoman Alice Bailey. Rather, they were said to be telepathically dictated by one of the same Eastern masters Blavatsky had identified earlier during the 19th century. This was said to be the Tibetan master Dwal Kul, often abbreviated to DK. This same DK, it was claimed, was the principal source for Blavatsky's secret doctrine. Now that Blavatsky had died, the Tibetan DK, it was said, was carrying on the same esoteric work through Alice Bailey. At any rate, today's students of Alice Bailey regard her as Blavatsky's true heir. Still, there are differences between the secret doctrine in the 19th century and the Bailey corpus. For our purposes, a certain shift can be seen regarding Christianity. With Blavatsky, Christianity is excoriated, condemned, in very hateful terms. With Bailey, the approach is much more subtle. Christianity is allowed for, but only as it is redefined by Alice Bailey. You can have a Christianity of Christ consciousness. You can even celebrate Easter, although we say that Buddha's birthday is of higher significance. But the Christianity that Alice Bailey is speaking about is not the Christianity of the Church. It's aiming to replace the Christianity of the Church. Thus, the Jesus who died on the cross is recast in the Bailey writings as simply an imperfect initiate of the third degree. Alice Bailey had various degrees of initiation, and some of the masters were up at the fourth, fifth, or sixth degree of initiation, but Jesus was a lower down third degree initiate. Although active study of Bailey's Theosophy had receded at Findhorn by 1980, when I first visited, age 16 again, her enduring legacy pervaded the place. The dawning age of Aquarius, for example, was taken completely for granted at Findhorn. Just obvious, of course it's happening. People spoke of the Christ, not Jesus. And they thought more in terms of, the quote-unquote higher self than God. Few would have had any problems with the notions of hidden initiates and masters. Maybe not everyone completely believed in them or was completely trying to channel them. No, not at all. But this would have just been common currency at Findhorn at that time. The idea of a transcendent, universal, spiritual path reigned, which, like Alice Bailey's New World Religion, was expressed, of course, by New Age spirituality. We New Agers have the New World spirituality of the future. Those Christians are stuck in the age of Pisces. Even if it wasn't always put like this was certainly the mentality that went into me as a young man. Had anyone at Findhorn ventured the opinion that Findhorn's approach represented a forerunner to Alice Bailey's New World Religion, few, if anybody, would have blinked an eye. Indeed, we'll be going into this in the next episode, but Alice Bailey, the upcoming episode of Findhorn, when I get it edited, might not be the next one, Alice Bailey spoke of a mystery school to be established in Scotland or Wales and in the future, and people believed that Findhorn was Alice Bailey's mystery school. But that's for the next episode, or the upcoming episode, when I can get it done. My singling out Theosophy as the primary source for Findhorn ideology may well be objected to. This relates to a whole thing I'm saying on this channel. I am really pointing very strongly to Theosophy. And some people would say I'm overly pointing to it. I think such people may not have done all the work that I've done and gone through the same things I've gone through. But anyway, to give an example here, some might point, for example, to Peter Caddy's, founder of Findhorn, Rosicrucian background, and say I emphasize Eastern Theosophy too strongly and Western esotericism not enough. In matter of fact, closer examination of Caddy's so-called Rosicrucianism clearly reveals a strong theosophical background. For Caddy's self-styled Rosicrucian magus, George Sullivan, was deeply indebted to Theosophy, and Caddy absorbed theosophical ideas throughout his youth. This is transparent reading Caddy's own autobiography. However, I see no need for nitpicking. Whilst Theosophy clearly shaped Peter Caddy, David Spangler, and other Findhorn pioneers, I do not deny other esoteric influences were present in the mix. In any event, Western Freemasonry was mixed up with Eastern Theosophy from the very beginning. Blavatsky, when she traveled to America, ladies and gentlemen, to bring her message from the East, You know, she really set out to found Theosophy in the English-speaking world, in America. She went to New York City in the early 1870s to found the Theosophical Society, and she was welcomed there into a Masonic lodge. Too much to go into now. But yes, there is a merging here, to say the very least, of Eastern Theosophy and at least certain varieties of, I would say Anglo-American Freemasonry. Huge topic that we can't go into now. I might also mention that Alice Bailey was English, and she moved to America, where she married a very high degree Mason, 32nd degree, Foster Bailey, who was unbelievably supporting everything she did. Foster Bailey, this high American Mason, is very, very key to the whole spread of Alice Bailey's Theosophy, or, as I said, Neo-Theosophy, because it is different from Blavatsky, and it does have this attempt at a superficial Christian gloss. Alright, before continuing here, I'm just going to point out that I have here, not sure how well you can see it, a copy of Peter Caddy's autobiography, in perfect timing, subtitle, Memoirs of a Man for the New Millennium, because this is how, the people at Findhorn would have been seeing Peter Caddy. This is the new millennium. This is the future. Man of the future. I'm holding this up for different reasons, but one is that I want to keep addressing or pointing to my thesis here, that the New Age is far more Eastern than many people realize. So many people, will point to, Peter Caddy, having a supposedly Western esoteric formation. I suggest that if you really dig deep into this book, you will see how Eastern and Theosophical it really was. It's not insignificant that this is, I believe, Peter Caddy in Tibet. At least in the Himalayas. Before Tibet was taken over by the Chinese in 1949, Peter Caddy was in the military. And he had the rare privilege of actually being allowed by the British military to go into Tibet during World War II. And Tibet, Alice Bailey, all of this was very, very immensely important to Peter Caddy, which you can gather if you read the book. As I say, I knew the man slightly. We'll be coming a little bit more to that, but my thesis here that all of this is far more Eastern than many people recognize, I think it can be borne out by looking at Peter Caddy's Memoirs of a Man for the New Millennium. Okay? So I'm dealing with objections again of my, great emphasis on Theosophy. And I say that still others may object that I pay too little attention to more modern, so-called channeled texts. For example, A Course in Miracles is a very significant channeled book for the New Age, and it has no obvious links to Theosophy. Later in the book, we'll consider how A Course in Miracles is remarkably in sync with Theosophy. Alice Bailey's Theosophy, we really should say. Alice Bailey's Neo-Theosophy. They're both presenting Jesus in very similar terms, maybe even identical. You drill down into it. And we shall likewise see how The Course in Miracles has fostered the notion of a quote-unquote New Age Jesus. Here is to say, a non-suffering, detached Jesus who once happened to be temporarily inhabited by the quote-unquote Christ consciousness. In fact, A Course in Miracles presents itself as channeled from Jesus.
I read that the author of the book, Helen Sheckman, said she took dictation from Jesus.
Well, there's nothing in the book. Maybe she did. Maybe she felt that way. The book is not trying to get
Who would know better than you? This is your whole...
I'll tell you what, because the book is
Did she take dictation from Jesus or not?
The book says nothing about that. The book does not try to get us to believe in God. The book does not try to get us to believe in Jesus. The book tries to get us to believe in each other. The book is about believing in each other and living with love for one another, which is the experience of a higher power or God as people understand.
Well, we can't argue with that. Okay.
Alas, Mr. Marr, we can easily argue with this terribly confusing statement. For although, technically speaking, A Course in Miracles never explicitly claims to be channeled from Jesus, it is so strongly implied as to beggar belief. The book's author, for example, claims, "My brothers slept during the so-called agony in the garden, but I could not be angry with them because I knew I could not be abandoned." Essentially, the author also claims to have gone through the crucifixion, saying, "I elected, for your sake and mine, to demonstrate that the most outrageous assault, as judged by the ego, does not matter. As the world judges these things, but not as God knows them, I was betrayed, abandoned, beaten, torn, and finally killed." And this author then goes on to claim that none of this matters, since the world is an illusion, and that the crucifixion was merely an illusion to be transcended. This is a very Eastern concept, one that again easily syncs with Eastern Theosophy. We are very close indeed here to the idea of Jesus as simply an initiate who is now an ascended master, which is why Alice Bailey and the so-called channeled Jesus of A Course in Miracles go hand in glove. Here we have some videos that make perfectly clear how much students of A Course in Miracles truly believe this is Jesus' authentic voice. And note the last video here by Eckhart Tolle, whose books have sold many millions. The Course may not have sold so well, yet it has still reached millions of people through the likes of Marianne Williamson, Eckhart Tolle, Oprah Winfrey, and many more. And now I'd like to run one of these videos where the vlogger, David Hoffmeister, makes very clear indeed the highly Eastern nature of this so-called Christian spirituality. And I thank Mr. Hoffmeister for his permission to run this little bit of his video here.
In fact, really, the less we know about spirituality is actually the better. Because I know many people who are Catholic, who've been raised Catholic, and they had a heck of a time with the Course in Miracles. Because the definitions that Jesus was bringing forth in the Course were so different. Atonement had a whole different meaning, and sin had a whole different meaning, and the Holy Spirit had a whole different meaning, and it's like they were like, oh, now I've got to unlearn my entire associations with all these words and learn new meanings. Like he's using these words to point me in a new direction. And so to the extent that you've got a lot of past learning and even past associations around spirituality, those will be the inhibitors, because he wants to unwind the mind from what you have learned before in the past and take you into what Buddha called emptying the mind. Jesus is doing the same thing. Some of you might remember lesson 189. Simply do this, be still, lay aside all thoughts of what you are or what God is. It sounds very Buddhist. Jesus and Buddha are both on the same wavelength. They're saying the same thing, you know, come inside, let go, release, keep coming, build your faith.
Speaking kindly, Mr. Hoffmeister, are you sure they're saying the same thing, Jesus and the Buddha? Or might it not be possible that you're hearing a highly Buddhist version of Jesus as fostered by A Course in Miracles and Alice Bailey's New Age writings? I do mean to try to be kind. I hope I don't sound condescending or patronizing, but watching your videos, you do seem a kind man. You know, a warm, sincere, idealistic person. And I want to stress this because, yes, one of the messages in this video is I want to stress that just how often New Agers are kind, sincere, good people, decent people. You know, when I went to go live at the Findhorn community in Scotland, I wasn't seeking diabolical black magic or black occult arts. I was seeking another spirituality. I had become convinced that Christianity, of which I knew nothing, was bankrupt, something that belonged to the old age of Pisces. And, you know, maybe it's worth saying here that I also, you know, at Findhorn, was a student of the Course in Miracles. You know, not for as long or as intensively as the many years I was a student of Theosophy, but like so many people into Alice Bailey, I was also into A Course in Miracles. And I took it absolutely seriously, like everyone else I knew at Findhorn studying the Course in Miracles, that the Course in Miracles was channeled from Jesus. Helen Schuckman, who gave this book to the world, certainly did present this as though it had been dictated to her by Jesus. She had channeled it from Jesus. And, you know, I've never come across any serious student of the Course in Miracles who believes anything different. They believe, as I believed, that Jesus has now come to correct the mistakes of Christianity. And as I say, you know, they hardly have any idea most of the time, you know, what Christ in the Gospels is really saying. You know, the message of the Gospels is not emptying your mind. It's not a Buddhist message. It's a very specific message about being saved. Saved. Saved through a crucifixion that the Course in Miracles basically says is illusory. There are things of tremendous magnitude going on here. You know, I won't say all across the world, I will say all across America. This new version of Christianity is being, you know, presented by powerful media forces. Something mighty is going on. Something mighty. And, you know, I wonder what you mean, Mr. Hofmeister, when you speak about building faith. What kind of faith? What kind of faith? You know, to me, it sounds like a very Eastern faith, even though it's being presented as a universal faith, appropriate for all peoples. And, yeah, it sounds to me, I imagine very much, Mr. Hofmeister, that the faith you're speaking about is something pretty much like this again, from Marion Williamson.
You've been around, and you're big. You were Oprah's spiritual advisor.
Well, I don't know about that, but she was very generous to me, that's for sure.
I know. So, because a lot of your politics does spring from this former life you had, or I guess the life you'll continue if you don't win, is based on, well, this book called A Course in Miracles?
Well, my career for the last 35 years, I have given talks based on this set of books called A Course in Miracles, which has been referred to as a self-study program of spiritual psychotherapy.
That sounds like Scientology.
How can you even say that?
No, it just sounds like it. I'm not saying it is.
No.
I'm just suspicious when something is based on one book. That always worries me.
But it is a book that is based on universal spiritual themes. It is not a religion. It does not claim any kind of monopoly on truth.
Wait.
It has no dogma. It has no doctrine.
Well.
It talks about love and forgiveness. And I think that so many of the people who are students of the Course in Miracles come from all religions and even no religions.
So, we would appear to have a Jesus here who is part therapist, offering a modern course of spiritual psychotherapy, and part the same as Buddha. And it's supposedly a universal message for people of all religions, or not, or all faiths. Itself, quote-unquote, Jesus, who tells us the church got his message wrong. He never really suffered, and the apostles corrupted his true meaning. You know, I haven't read all of it, but there's a New Age text by somebody called Timothy Freak, that's F-R-E-K-E, maybe I mispronounced his name, but it's called The Laughing Jesus. You know, there's this whole kind of New Age idea that Jesus didn't suffer for our sins. Anyway, the Course and other apparently diverse, I don't think they're as diverse as people think, New Age texts coalesce around a common core, one harboring considerable animosity to traditional Christianity. Are the manifold correspondences between these different English channeled texts simply coincidence? I believe not. Something that has singularly impressed me over the years is the high respect students of Alice Bailey regularly pay A Course in Miracles. I've seen this repeatedly. Alice Bailey students are very, very positive about A Course in Miracles. A man I knew at Findhorn gave me his frank opinion as to what characterized the truly serious New Age disciple. And what he said was that either one was a serious student of Alice Bailey, or failing that, one was a serious student of A Course in Miracles. That was his opinion. If back in the 80s, if you're really serious about the New Age, you're either into Alice Bailey or you're into A Course in Miracles. Okay? Nothing else conferred the same consummate credentials as these two, books, sets of books, Alice Bailey and A Course in Miracles. Other students of Alice Bailey render similar homage to The Course in Miracles. However, I know of no study that rigorously examines the many correspondences between these two New Age juggernauts, and we have no scope for this here. Nevertheless, here is a task the world could profit greatly from: a close, studied reflection on the interrelationship between English Theosophy and English channel texts like A Course in Miracles. I hope someone out there might do this. I don't think I have the time to do it. In the absence of such a study, the reader can either heed my opinions or not. However, personal experiences, not all of which I feel free to share, because people do tell you things in confidence, and you have to honor that, convince me of a profound, unfathomable web that unites Findhorn, Theosophy, and apparently unrelated matters like A Course in Miracles, Masonry, and other things besides. Yes, I have many memories which personally convince me of what I say, even if they only offer circumstantial evidence. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of what I'm going to read here. I just want to say again that this episode is going to conclude with something a bit different. For something like a quarter of an hour, I'm going to go into more personal things. I'll maybe give you a brief indication right now because, it's not the only content there, but it's relevant. I want to be speaking a little bit there for some of my, Irish viewers, because yes, really my heart is very torn open, by the Irish dimension here. The Irish dimension. And there is, such an irony for me. I think I've said this before, but here I was in the 1980s at Findhorn, seeking a better world, seeking a higher society with a, spiritual vision. I'd never been to Ireland at that point, and I sometimes wonder what it would have been like had I come to Ireland. I would have encountered a society that was much more poor in material terms, also much less capitalistic. Society definitely with certain problems, as all human societies have, but I would have encountered a spirituality, who knows, maybe it would have been enough to turn my head. You know, I sometimes speak about these Irish Eucharistic chapels, the presence in there. If I had compared that to the kind of sanctuaries, we're going to be speaking about this in the next episode at Findhorn. Findhorn had these sanctuaries, sort of non-denominational rooms of quite potent silence in a way. But the silence in a Eucharistic chapel in Ireland is very different. I begin to digress. But yeah, my heart is ripped open when I see that this thing that I devoted, you know, a good 20 years of my life, if not more to, is actually now eating away at the core of everything I find precious in Ireland. But look, to come to the final things from the book, now I'm just going to say this. I have two books on the New Age. This is a non-fiction book. This book is both fiction and non-fiction. The fiction section, I try to speak about these things in a more popular and accessible way, and then there's a more, attempt to be scholarly for a long non-fiction section that's kind of updating this book and really going into sort of more modern phenomena of the New Age, and yes, a little bit more of the kind of conspiratorial currents that I'm naming here. So this book's got more of that. But okay, to come to the final section that we're going to read here, I'm really speaking about the problem of memory. You know, things confided to me in my youth that, I'm not really always sure that I'm justified in repeating. There's a lot here in the book that I do feel justified in repeating. There's a lot here in the lines themselves. Some of it's between the lines, also in the other book, Between the Lines. But let's just read the final section here about how my memories of Findhorn and the New Age shape what I'm saying here. Yes, I have many memories which personally convince me of what I say here, even if they offer only circumstantial evidence. I can't prove any of this to you, ladies and gentlemen. Still, there are a few memories I do feel free to share. Here is just one. Peter Caddy finds me, age 23 perhaps, working alone one afternoon at Findhorn. Peter and I start talking, and somehow the subject of DK comes up, the Theosophical Master Dwal Cool that Alice Bailey was said to channel. And Peter gets excited. I really recall him getting excited, my speaking about, Alice Bailey's alleged master, the Master Dwal Cool, because somehow he latches onto the idea that I too am channeling this Tibetan. I have said nothing of the sort, but perhaps the prospect is so exciting for Peter that he gets carried away. Here at Findhorn, another person, like Alice Bailey, is in direct contact with the Master Dwal Cool. Perhaps I will be the source of a new revelation. I don't know how he got this idea. I wasn't saying that. I was saying I was seriously studying Alice Bailey. Misheard me, I guess. But no, I tell Peter, he has got it wrong. I am only reading Alice Bailey. Peter then appears to lose all interest in me and moves on. And here is another Findhorn memory. I am sitting at a large gathering in what is called the Universal Hall. You saw the Universal Hall behind me in that footage at Findhorn that we shot earlier. But in this meeting in the Universal Hall, a respected Findhorn elder has risen to speak. His background is evidently both ecological and anti-nuclear. But this elder explains he has had a need to rethink. For recently, he has been forced to consider the immensely high praise that Bailey gave to the advent of nuclear fission. Indeed, Bailey went so far as to extol the dropping of the bomb on Japan as an event of the greatest magnitude and wonder. For her, it's incredible. You wouldn't believe, we'll come to it in another episode, how spiritually important she sees the dropping of the bomb. Another episode. Maybe on Alice Bailey's One World Religion. Now, I do not recall the elder's exact words, the man who was, anti-nuclear, but to my memory, his message is clear. Alice Bailey has spoken. The case is closed. This elder must now revise his anti-nuclear stance. Even the bomb must be good. Alice Bailey said so. Looking back on this and more, Alice Bailey would appear to possess the highest dogmatic authority, even whilst her followers dismiss religion. Indeed, Bailey becomes more infallible than the Pope. And papal infallibility is of course very, very limited, restricted to the rarest of instances amongst the thousands of papal pronouncements. I really do feel this, ladies and gentlemen, with the people that I've known into Alice Bailey. It has become a dogmatic religion for them. And all the while, they're saying that religion is passé. It's outmoded with the age of Pisces. But Alice Bailey is a dogmatic authority for them. Further memories haunt my soul. I am speaking to a leading American New Age author who frequently visits Findhorn. We are standing chatting in a hallway where she enthusiastically professes her love of Alice Bailey. However, one does not find Bailey's name mentioned much in her popular books. I'm not going to say who this author is, but I am going to say now that she's been very definitely interviewed by Oprah Winfrey. She's not one of Oprah Winfrey's main gurus, I think, but Oprah Winfrey has carried her message, since that time, all across the airwaves in America. All right. One does not find Bailey's name mentioned much in her popular books. The Bailey imprint is hidden. Personal memories point me to that strange, unfathomable web that links not only Findhorn and Theosophy, but also Masonry, secular approval from organizations like the United Nations, and other seemingly unlikely things. For I knew many souls connected to Findhorn's origins, including Eileen Caddy, in the time before she was honored as a member of the British Empire again, and Findhorn, before Findhorn became an NGO in the United Nations. Most of these people I did not know well. I did know well people who were close to the key people, I should say that. Still, I heard things that now weigh on my heart. Given that I cannot substantiate everything I see, I simply point. And you must be free, lector, to take these pointers from me or not, as you see fitting. Yeah, it's up to you. I can't prove any of this to you. But I hope that some people will really think about what I'm saying. And maybe they'll sort of question the idea that Christianity is just naturally diminishing, the whole New Age idea that it's going to fade away. And maybe they'll really see that people are working here. In fact, maybe the last thing I say before we move on to the final section, here's something else I can say about my memories, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'll say this. The people I knew were serious. They are people that worked, some of the key figures that I've known worked morning, noon, and night over many decades for this. They were serious. They weren't working, for their own, they weren't working for money. They weren't working, to be superstars or, for their own glamour and personal success. No, they were seriously committed to this as their vision for a better world. And with great seriousness, they labored very, very hard for this. And they're still laboring. This is really out there. People are trying to challenge everything like the Catholics, like I have become through the grace of God. Catholics, like the Catholics I know and love in Ireland. People are working to overcome this, even to destroy this, and create this New Age replacement of Christianity. Alright, that's where we're finishing with the book today. It's a big book. Obviously, there's a lot more about the New Age in the book, and we'll be coming to more things in the upcoming Findhorn episode. But I suggested at the beginning of this episode that I might want to say some more personal things. I've come to some kind of newfound clarity about the New Age and my relationship to the New Age. I think I've actually come to newfound clarity about a lot of things this summer. I think I'll just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that this summer has been quite extraordinary for me. I think that in years to come, I will never quite forget the summer of 2024. A lot of things came into focus. Now, there's also been a real quality of ordeal. I'd like to think that the ordeal is ending. Seems like it might be. But our Lord permits these ordeals because they can really heighten consciousness and make one aware. And what I felt within that last big episode, I felt like even I, who after 40 years in the New Age, immersion in Alice Bailey, discovering the Catholic mystery, all of this, I, who should be more awake, to what's really going on here. I, who, actually criticize people for not being really awake enough. Even I'm not awake enough to what's really going on here. That Christianity is being deeply menaced, destroyed, obliterated, and replaced by something else. Something else.
The old way is the hierarchy has the authority. Church authorities tell you how to worship in church and how to behave outside of church. The new spirituality is that you are your own best authority. As you work to know and love yourself, you discover how to live a more spiritual life. The old is God and the path to worship him have already been defined, and all you need to do is follow the directions. The new is being able to listen within for your own definition of spirituality. Your deeper longings are your compass on the search.
But I want to say what I mean by myself not even being awake to it. Those of you who have heard other episodes on this channel may recall that I've spoken about, like we all know, that there are children dying in this world through malnutrition. But, until you really were to hold a dying child in your arms, you might not really be awake to it. Or, another big development in the course of my lifetime. So, I'm 61 now, been with the New Age, watching it for 40 years. But, I'm increasingly watching homelessness. In the West, at least, especially in the Anglo-American world, I have a dear, like brother, an Englishman, but, in a European country. And he tells me that when he comes back to London, it feels like London has become Dickensian. Because he doesn't remember this kind of homelessness. People on the streets, people living in tents. Back in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't there. And in the European country he's living in, it's still not there. London feels Dickensian. This is another mighty shift going on as capitalism has gone into overdrive and is ravaging us. We know this with our heads, but how many of us really feel with the homeless? If you've never been homeless, I actually have been very close to homeless on a couple of occasions. Or really, I have been homeless. I haven't been in a tent on the street. But, no, I've been homeless. What is it to really feel this? And what is it to really feel what the New Age is doing? I was in an Irish town the other day, and, I came across this New Agey shop. It was, just a very, not a very big Irish town, but, it told me that, I could buy Buddhas there, I could buy crystals there, I could buy mystical art, kind of testified to people yearning for the mystical, I suppose. And then, I was in the Catholic Church in this town. I was very, very hit by a very special and incredible presence in that. And I look out at Ireland drowned in all this Anglo-American culture, that is promoting the New Age. In fact, didn't know I was going to say this, but, some of you may recall the sort of slightly hippie sort of bit I did in the last episode. And, I sort of mimicked myself as a New Ager in the past. When the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars, then peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars. And somebody said he'd like more videos of that. He was joking. But, I realized if I were doing New Age videos, I might be a lot more successful. Because the powers that be, ladies and gentlemen, they're interested in supporting the New Age. They're not interested in supporting this. There are powers that be that are very happy in Ireland that the Catholic Church is in retreat. Powers that be? Powers that be? Oh man, dude, aren't you being a bit paranoid here? I mean, look, I don't want to slam your religion. I'm a universalist. I embrace all religions. But isn't it just a bit possible that it's not the powers that be that are repressing your precious church? Isn't it possible, your church might have got something a bit wrong here or there? Or isn't it possible that the age of Pisces is finished now? Consciousness moves on. The evolution of consciousness goes on. Why don't you read Dan Brown, The Da Vinci Code? Why don't you read A Course in Miracles? You'll see there, the real Jesus says it was never really about the crucifixion. I mean, your patriarchal religion, I'm sorry, man, it's a bit sadistic. Nailing a guy to a cross? Look, I really don't want to be so negative here, man. I really don't. But maybe you just need to lighten up a bit. Lighten up. Don't worry so much. Don't worry. Be happy. So here I am in this small Irish town, looking at this shop, selling Buddhas and crystals and tarot cards and, mystical art and I can't remember what else. And, right up the road there is this Catholic church which, things keep going the way it's going. These churches will be closing. People are being denied the greatest mystery that I have ever found and are being guided into a kind of cheap, New Age aesthetic. I don't know what to say. But for me, it was a moment of, this is what I've got to work for. Another thing that came up in the kind of comments of the last episode about the occult replacement of Christianity, why wasn't I speaking about Islam? And if I recall correctly, I need to go look again, one person there was really, you could see that this person, it's a woman I believe, really feels in her heart, what is happening to Christians around the world because of, certain forms of Islam. I don't want to deny that at all. I actually think that the transformation that is happening in the Anglo-American world and in Ireland, I think that this New Age is a far more powerful influence in Ireland than Islam is. But this person had their heart open to Christian suffering because of certain forms of Islam, at least. I salute that. But I'm not going to do videos about that, ladies and gentlemen, because I only try to speak about what I know about on this channel. And I hope that this sets what I do apart from maybe certain other video channels. All of this I will make clear to you, ladies and gentlemen. We are looking for support with this Buy Me a Coffee scheme, either in the form of one-off donations, of which we've received quite a number, and we're very grateful to you for those, but also this membership scheme with people, becoming angels or archangels or cherubim or seraphim, starting at $5 a month, which I know could be too much for certain of my friends. If you're one of those people that $5 is too much for, but you still like to get the premium exclusive content, because this is the idea. We're going to be doing, like a monthly podcast that is only for members. This is the idea. This is what we want to do. And they'll probably be more personal like this. So they'll be voice only, I think. Those are easier. But we're wondering if there will be like a small community of people forming around this. We don't know yet. It's an experiment. We'll also be, actively praying for the people that are joining this little community that we hope. So, there are people, around this channel that are seeing what we're doing over the years. For me, for my wife Kim, we've been doing this for 15 years. We've been, putting the website out there. There's hundreds of pages up there now. I've written the 3 books. We've got the videos up. And it's all been quite slow, plodding work, which doesn't mean that I've been lazing around. Crazy amounts of time go into each of these episodes, precisely because I want to know what I'm talking about. I don't want to misrepresent things. I don't want to speak about things that I don't know about. And it takes time to get things right. As I said, I spent 7 or 8 years writing that book. I had a lovely man suggest to me that, everything would just work better if I could get, the videos out every day. Not only could I not get the videos out every day, but in my case, the idea that a video that I had produced every day was actually out there would be a form of immense suffering for me, because I would be, in my case, horrified by the quality of what it would be like. Other people maybe can do that, but I need to be striving for something that is researched and thought out in a deep way. Other people have different kinds of channels, and their heart speaks to people, they inspire people. I'm not trying to knock people that put out that kind of content, but my kind of content, is different and needs to be different. And there's no way that, the whole YouTube algorithm rewards you if you can just, pump out the content, and it rewards quantity over quality. And I think what I want to say with this membership program is I want to be straight with people. I want to be honest with you. If I ask you to support me, this is about doing what we do as well as possible. And I say that knowing that these videos professionally aren't that great. I'm doing this with an old webcam. I don't have all the skills, to produce a slick professional product. But the videos, in terms of their content, if not necessarily their surface, the surface is not slick, but in terms of their content, I hope that they reflect something that has some kind of depth to it, that maybe I even dare to say could be a little bit unusual on YouTube. So I want to say, if any of you are in a position to support us in doing what we've been doing, the way we've been doing it, we'd be very grateful. Yeah, on a different note, I'll also say this. So this now, ladies and gentlemen, is not about appealing for funds. It's just another piece of personal content that might interest some of you. For years, I've understood my Irish friends who really despair of what's happening in Ireland, and it's very, very, very painful. But somehow through this personally extraordinary summer of 2024, and I don't know if I can really tell you why or how now, ladies and gentlemen, but I've come to more hope than I've ever had in recent years, despite all appearances of the deep Christian and Catholic roots of this country, of this people, of this land, being able to prevail against the storm that's landing in these shores through the Anglo-American world. This extraordinary summer of 2024 is actually giving me more confidence in Ireland. And I give thanks to our Lord that he has brought my wife and myself to Ireland, and this is also part of the work that we want to do. These churches that are closing down in Ireland, all these things happening, we hope to make some kind of difference through this apostolate, this online apostolate. I won't really say a lot more now, ladies and gentlemen, but this gives you ideas of things shifting for Kim and myself. And there are other things shifting. As I say, some of them have shifted through the ordeal. We're seeing things in a different light. I'd like to think that we're seeing things with a greater measure of compassion. I hope, I pray, for what's really going on out there. Whether it's homeless people in the streets of Dublin or London, or whether it's people being sucked down into the new age and having no idea about the sacraments or the Catholic mystery. That's all I'm going to say for now, ladies and gentlemen. I just thought I'd throw out these personal things for any of you who might be interested. The final thing I'll just point to is that, of course, I am an author. These themes are explored in my 3 books. I do have an Amazon author page, and that's another way you can support the work, and maybe give yourself something as well by buying one of the books if you feel so inclined. So that's it for now, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.